I want to welcome everyone here today. Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Molis. I'm the current president at Hewlett-East Rockaway Jewish Center, and I want to thank all those in attendance for what promises to be an enlightening and educational discussion on Israeli-Arab peace agreements and the ethical dilemmas that exist in such agreements. It is my esteemed pleasure to introduce our distinguished guest in today's discussion, Ilan Avidor Sztulman. Mr. Sztulman was born in Sao Paulo, Brazil, before emigrating to Israel in 1975. He received 2 bachelor's degrees, one from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem in international relations, and one from the Open University in Tel Aviv in humanities and social sciences. Between degrees, Mr. Sztulman served in a special unit of the Israeli Air Force from 1978 to 1982, rose to the rank of major, and was decorated in 1981. In 2006, Mr. Sztulman received a master's degree in political science, diplomacy, and security from Tel Aviv University. Mr. Sztulman speaks with us today with an impressive resume of diplomatic service on behalf of the Israeli government. From 2001 to 2008, he worked for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as a deputy manager in the communications division in its information and internet department. From 2008 to 2010, Mr. Sztulman continued his work in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where he served as the deputy director for public affairs. He received his first posting in 2010 in Sao Paulo, Brazil, where he served as Israel's Consul General until 2013. From 2014 to 2016, he was the Minister of Public Diplomacy at the Israeli Embassy in Washington, D.C., creating and coordinating public diplomacy strategic policy for all Israeli diplomatic missions in the United States. In 2016, Mr. Sztulman was appointed Israel's ambassador to Argentina and was stationed in Buenos Aires until 2019. In 2021, Mr. Sztulman was named Consul General for Israel's mission to the United Arab Emirates and is currently stationed, speaking to us from Dubai. Yes. General Consul Sztulman and his wife, Jacqueline Starosta Lambert, have 4 children and 4 grandchildren. Consul General Sztulman has dedicated the last 2 decades of his life to Israel's security and its peace objectives, and we are incredibly fortunate to be able to listen to the conversation that will take place between the Consul General and our own Rabbi Michel Schlesinger, a fellow citizen of Brazil, after which there will be time for questions and further discussion. Please, if you have questions as you go along, please write those questions directly to Rabbi Schlesinger in the chat function, and he will sort through them throughout the time of their discussion. And without further ado, I give you Rabbi Schlesinger.
Stephen, thank you very much. Thank you all for being with us. And thank you, Ilan Sztulman, a close friend, for accepting to be here for this conversation. Actually, the very first conversation I have here at the Hewlett-East Rockaway Jewish Center. It's Chaim, Tree of Life Synagogue, and we are starting a new program called Ethical Dilemmas. And we will actually today talk a little bit about justice and peace and the tension between the two. And to start, I'd like to ask you, Ilan, how did you end up being the Consul General of Israel to Dubai?
Well, I actually asked to be here. It's a strange story, but my last post was ambassador to Argentina. So the ministry wanted me to stay in Latin America after I finished my term, and they offered me, or us, me and my wife, my family, a post of Brazil. And as Michel, you well know, Brasilia is not really a nice city to live in. In Brazil, it's not really a nice place to live. To visit, yes, but not to live. So we refused the post, and then they said, "Well, there's another opening here. You've been an ambassador, you're going to be a consul general again, but it's a very challenging post. which that was before the Abrahamia Accords were signed. So we knew it was starting to be signed. So they said, if you're willing to go. So we said, okay, let's have a look. So we came here, spent like 10 days, my wife and me and one of our daughters. And we liked the place and we liked the idea, and we decided to stay. That's it. And we came back to Israel, closed up our house and came here. And have been very happy since. That's the truth.
And I would like to encourage all of you to write your questions to me on the chat, as Stephen said. And I would like to bring us to the conversation, some Jewish sources that talk about this tension between peace and justice. So the first of them is from Masechet Derech Eretz. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says that the world stands on three things: on justice, on truth, and on peace. Rabbi Muna said those three are really one thing. If justice is served, truth is served, and peace will be made. In any place that there is peace, there will be justice. So somehow peace leads to justice, according to this first source. The second one is from the Yerushalmi, Jerusalem Talmud, that says, the law does not order you to run after or pursue the other commandments, but only to fulfill them on the appropriate occasion. But peace you must seek, lirdof, in your place, and pursue it even to another place as well. So there is an additional mitzvah, additional commandment connected to shalom, connected to peace, that you have to lirdof, to pursue it where you are and where you are not to, even in other places. And finally, we have a last source from Sanhedrin, which is the judgment that has peace within it. You must say, this is mediation, as both sides are satisfied with the result. So whenever you have a situation of mediation, and mediation is a very old Jewish tradition, the rabbi is a mediator. And when you manage to mediate, you have both justice and peace. So in light of those sources, I would like to bring a question from one of our congregants, George Sheeran, who wrote the following, Ilan. In the context of peace in the Middle East, are the parties seeking justice as part of peace, or is peace an end by itself? What does justice mean in the peace process? Does justice mean retribution of some kind for the wrongs of the past? If so, is this even possible? Can the parties reach a peace that is not just, but provides the parties with certain of their critical goals and results in governance rules that provide a way forward? So how do you see this tension between justice and peace regarding to the agreements?
I don't think there's a tension here. I mean, international relations, unfortunately, I mean, I wish in a word, the perfect word, it would be justice would be the main factor in looking for them. But unfortunately, it's not so. I mean, the countries behave based on interest, and what might look like just solution for one is not a just solution for another. So it's very difficult, I think, to define a just solution. I'm talking about international affairs in a conflict, because conflicts are very complex, very And people are not really looking for justice. They're looking for peace. If you're talking about the conflict in the Middle East, I mean, any conflict, any solution that would not include the Palestinian, issue would not be a just solution. And we would very much like to have this just solution and be able to sit down with the Palestinians and negotiate a peace agreement and finish the state war. But unfortunately, we haven't been able to do this. I mean, it's a very complex situation. Most of the Palestinian population in, let's say, the land of Israel, I won't say the state of Israel because part of it is occupied territory, but most of them do not want to do any peace at all. I'm not even saying about a just peace. They would take the Jews into consideration and the fact that we have also a right for our state as well as they do, but they don't want that. So we had to face this fact that this paradigm that says that peace in the Middle East will only come when we solve the Palestinian issue and start looking for a peace that might not be just, but it's for us it is. So we started negotiating. That's many years ago. That's this negotiation with the Gulf states started 20 years ago. We've been here, having not formal but informal embassies, representatives for over 20 years. And we started looking for the moment that we could have these relations open and formal and have diplomatic relations, exchange of diplomats, et cetera, et cetera. And last year this happened, and that was the Abrahamia Accords. We had a gathering of conditions that happened here. We had a very friendly president in Washington. We had a very, friendly governments in the region that wanted to get the advantages of making peace with Israel. So we seized the opportunity and we signed the agreement. And I can't tell you again that it's a just peace, but it's for us, if you're talking about dilemmas. So if the Palestinians don't want to make peace with us, should we wait for them, for eternity? So no, we find, whoever in the Middle East wants to do peace with us. And our hope in this case is that this agreement will work so well. I mean, with the Emirates, with Bahrain, with Morocco, and maybe the Palestinians and also the Lebanese and the Syrians will realize that the way of violence is not, that peace is much better than war, and will come and negotiate with us. And this dilemma for us was very easy to solve because, for us, and I can tell you personally, for me, that's one of the reasons that I wanted to come here, because, I've been in the scope of my capabilities, I've been reaching out for peace, and peace programs and peace groups, talking to Palestinians, etc., all my life. And I wanted this opportunity to be part of something positive in this scenario of, the relations between all countries in the Middle East that was not very nice for Israel. And it's been very challenging this year for us, but it's been very fruitful too. Today the president just left. The president of Israel came for a 2-day visit. And you had the Atikva sung in downtown Dubai with Sheikh Maktoum. So I think that this is worth everything. But the dilemmas in life, I think, well, Michel, you're a rabbi, you must know that better than me, are not always solved. You have to live with them and, do the best you can. That's what we try to do.
Ilan, do those agreements raise the pressure over the Palestinians, can we see already any result?
No, unfortunately, that I have to say the opposite. The Palestinians are very, very angry with the Emirates, to the point that when the Houthis, this terrorist group, Shiite terrorist group in Yemen that is financed, trained, armed by Iran. When they attacked Abu Dhabi a week ago, the Palestinian Authority put out a statement saying that they support the Houthis fight, etc., etc. The Houthis are not, they're not even Arab, but they Shiites. It's a completely different battle from the Palestinians, but still they supported them because they're hitting the Emirates that betrayed them by making peace with Israel. That's how, the feeling on the street is. And but then, yes, that didn't change at all. On the contrary, I think it made them even more frustrated.
What are, Ilan, the similarities and differences of being a diplomat in Washington, Sao Paulo, Buenos Aires, and Dubai?
Well, the similarities is that I represent, my country and my people too, as, in the same place. The differences are very, the cultural scene is very different, completely different from one another. The language is different, and the way you expect it to behave is also very different. Actually, I have to say that here is the place that I'm enjoying most of this post that I served, because there is one characteristic in the culture of the Emirates. The Emirates are Bedouins, basically. Bedouins that found oil and made it good. They have the personal relationship is the basis for everything. This is true everywhere, I think. People, you don't want to do business with somebody you don't like. But here it goes to an extreme. If they don't like you, they won't talk to you. They will not help you. They won't do any business. I mean, diplomatic business or even, commercial business. First of all, you have to gain the trust. You have to gain the care of the other guy, and then he'll talk to you. And that's one hand, it's challenging because you have to, make people like you before even they cooperate with you, which for Israelis is not very easy. Israelis are we're kind of rough on the edges. But on the other hand, I admire that approach. I think that's a nice thing. And once you become friends, and I've acquired already a few Emirati friends, then they are like your brothers. I mean, they will do anything for you, which, well, Michel, as well as me, in Brazil is not always the case. You can be very polite and nice, but you won't be really a friend of somebody. So, and the same can be said in Washington. Washington is a city of diplomats and government people. Everybody's very polite. Everybody's very nice. But nobody will invite you for a Shabbat dinner, or very few people will do that. It's a very closed society. Here is the opposite. I mean, once you get to know people and they like you, they become really, really, and they have a tradition. It's a bit, not very feministic. It's called majlis. It's just for the men. So men invite all the men friends, and they sit together, and they eat and they smoke, and they don't drink, of course, because they Muslims, they don't drink alcohol. But it's a tradition that they spend together their time, and they do that 2 or 3 times, and that's where things get done. All the business, all the government things are done in the majlis, that all the men are sitting, talking, and making friends, actually, or keeping the friendships, it's quite nice too.
Personal relations are key, and this is the reason why we are, the both of us, here together, because of our relation. And I know that you are an egalitarian person. So how do you deal with that society that it is not egalitarian, you and Jackie?
It's a challenge. First of all, they are trying to change. It's really interesting, what's happening here. We thought that when we came to Dubai, we thought, God, now we can't hold hands when we walk in the mall or in the streets, and we have to dress. Jackie, my wife, would have to dress very, and in Dubai that doesn't happen. In Sharjah, Abu Dhabi, other places a little bit, but Dubai, it's like one thing you have to, people think Emirates, you have 10 million people, out of which 9 million are not local people. They have just 10% of the population who is local. So in Dubai, you have people from everywhere. You have people from Iran, from India, from England, from everywhere. The common language of all those people is English. People barely talk Arabic. The most people, I mean, over 90% of the people. So they doing the changes, like women can dress any way they like. You can drink alcohol in public in Dubai. This is not like other countries in the region. And you have many women who are very, very capable. In the government, you have a higher rate of women than the state of Israel, for instance. So when they see that a woman is capable, and they do give the opportunity for professional, accomplishments or whatever. But with this, you have women that are in very high government positions, and they are second marriage of somebody. And, it's very, I've never came close enough to one of those, government officials to ask them how they can deal with that, being such a high power, government official, and then on the other hand, be a second wife of somebody. But they live like that. So I think for me, what I had to swallow and understand is that this is a different culture, a different country, and I have to respect the way they, like to live. So once I respect that, I get to accept that. Of course, when we invite people over home, I don't invite just men. And my wife, Jackie, that is with us, and our friends, international friends, are all, with their wives together. But if I get invited to one of those majlis, she can't come. So you're talking about dilemma. So it's a dilemma. Should I accept that or not? But, the fact that I accept or not would not change anything, because that's the way they are. So that's it. I have to accept that. I had a discussion a week ago with a very good friend, my Emirate friend, who was talking about his kid. He said, well, it's about time we found a wife for him. And I said, great, his name. What do you mean finding a wife? He says, yes, with us, like we used to do with shidduch. And I said, but Rafe, you have a master's degree from MIT. You're a very intelligent man. You speak, 5 languages. He said, no, that doesn't have anything to do. That's the way it is. I mean, if he wants to find another wife later that he really loves, okay, he can do that. But his first wife has to be proper, and we have to find it, the family and all the traditions. So that's the way they live. I have to respect that.
If we organize a trip from our congregation to visit you in Dubai, we can include men and women.
Yes.
Okay.
Of course. And I arrange for you meetings with this high-powered women that live here. That it's a contradiction. It's not a dilemma, the contradiction, because they know that they need to open the doors for women, and they are doing this. But on the other hand, the culture is the culture, and tradition is tradition. So they have, to deal with this. But so it's a very weird situation for us who are egalitarian, that, think that men and women are the same and should have the same. And but I have no other way of dealing with this but to accept what, the way of life for them.
Yeah, let us say that Israel has its own challenges too. regarding marriages and divorces, and once it's the rabbinate, the Orthodox rabbinate that runs those rituals. It's not exactly an egalitarian situation for men and women.
Well, that's why we never married, Orthodox wedding, waiting to meet you sometime for you to marry us. We actually got married in New York, completely civil ceremony. We didn't get in Israel. I'll never, and also I have older kids, my two daughters did not get married in the rabbinate. They got married, one with a Reform rabbi that's the synagogue that we all went to, when they grew up. And the other one did a ceremony with a friend. And just my son, my younger son, married with a, let's say, proper rabbi, which is an organization in Israel that it's Orthodox rabbis rebelling against the rabbinites, called Sohar. And they are Orthodox, but they also understand that the rabbinate is a, problematic institution, that people don't want to get married because of them. So they offer different ceremonies. And so my son married one of those rabbis who's an army buddy from him. And yes, Israel has its cases too. That's why I'm saying, in Portuguese, you say, if you have a roof of glass, you don't throw rocks at your neighbor. So I can't really criticize the Emirates, because in Israel, we're not much better than that.
So those who will join me for the trip to Dubai will witness me wedding you and Jackie there.
Inshallah. That would be nice. It would be an interesting experience.
You will be the first Israeli diplomat to get married in Dubai, for sure.
I am already the first diplomat who had a daughter born in Dubai, which was very, the first Israeli in general born in Dubai was my daughter Mia, that was born 5 months ago. So
it's amazing.
We're getting used to that. And that's part of the beautiful thing about this mission, I'm always being the first. When my daughter was born, I came to the Minister of Interior to register her. And so they have the computer, the system, and they said, okay, nationality, and we say Israeli. The guy looks on the computer and says, sir, there's no Israeli in the system. I said, what do you mean? That's, that's our passports, we're Israelis. So he said, no, you have to come later. So I talked to the Minister of Interior in Abu Dhabi, and they changed. So I came the next day, and okay, so there was already Israeli there. And then they write religion also here in the birth certificate. So they said, what's your religion? I said, well, we're Jews. So they look in the system. Sorry, sir, we have Christian, Muslim, and Indian, And I said, well, we neither of those three. So, okay, there's a no religion, option. So I said, okay, put the no religion, and that's, that's fine. But it's and now actually I don't know. I don't know if they changed that, because I gave up on that. I said, okay, I'm not, I won't fight over this one.
It's an amazing story. So now the Israeli option at least is there.
Yes, the Israeli option is there. Everything that we do here is a first, and that's the challenge. I mean, from changing your license, the driving license, we can't do that yet because there's no agreement. Everything that you would think, document recognition. So you bring a birth certificate from Israel. They in the beginning, they didn't know how to, they look at this, how do you read this? What side is this? What language is this? But we're moving along, and we've done a lot of, we have already, free tax agreement. If you don't pay taxes here, don't pay in Israel, and vice versa. We can call, when I arrived here, you couldn't call Israel. You dialed 972, the Israeli code, it will cut off. So now you can call, and there's, it's a process that things are stabilizing, and they also learning about Israelis, because there's been 300,000 Israelis this year here that visited Dubai. So they're also learning how to deal with us. And the only one thing that they haven't learned to deal with the Jews is the fighting between us. This is really amazing them that, a rabbi is not a rabbi to everybody, that's different. They said, but how do you manage? I mean, so, well, we fight, we don't manage. We keep fighting each other, but that's the way we are.
This is our dilemma.
Yes.
I would like once again to invite you all to write questions. We have a chat under your screen, so please feel free to add questions. I would like to ask a question sent by our president, by Stephen Mollis. Consul General Sztulman, to date, peace agreements exist between Israel and certain Arab countries, including Egypt, Jordan, and United Arab Emirates and Morocco.
And Bahrain.
Bahrain.
Yeah.
With the exception of Jordan, the existing peace agreements were made with hawkish Likud prime ministers in charge, including Menachem Begin and Benjamin Netanyahu. Do you believe that the far right in Israeli politics must sign off on any peace deal with Arab countries? And if so, what does that say about the prospects for peace during the current coalition government formed by Prime Minister Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid?
Well, it depends with whom, Stephen, you ask. If you're talking about peace with the Palestinians, I don't think it's very likely. Mostly not because of this current government, because this current government, if you stop to think, it's the first Israeli government that we have Muslim, ministers, Israeli citizens who are Muslim but are, acting as ministers. This coalition, they haven't got a ministerial post, but they support the government. It's an Arab Muslim party, which is very much inspired by the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, which is Ram. So it's a very peculiar government, and I don't think there's, they could surprise everybody. Peace with other countries, yes, definitely. And I can tell you that we're working very, very hard in the region for that to happen. This issue of making peace with our neighbors is not a discussion in Israel. Both the right and the left are very much in favor of this. What divides people in Israel is what to do about the occupied territories. And that's the dilemma we have, because the dilemma is if we don't set up a Palestinian state or a Palestinian entity somehow, within 20, 30, 40 years, most, there will be more than half of the population. And then they can challenge the definition of the state of Israel as the homeland for the Jews, because they're going to be the majority. On the other hand, if we don't reach a peace agreement with the Palestinians and we just withdraw from the occupied territories like we did with Gaza, we actually threatening the existence, the very existence of the state of Israel, because they can get the capability to really hurt us, and I don't think wiping us out, but making our lives very difficult. So that's our dilemma. If we want to if we want to stay a democratic Jewish state, or have a dual nationality state, or whatever, I don't know. But I think that the wish for peace, it's universal in Israel. There's no, if you come to the right-wing party, they want to have peace, but they don't want, as the dilemma that you said, the just peace. They say, even I can't say that. I have to, renew my thing. The right people in Israel, the right-wing people in Israel, claim that Jordan is the Palestinian state, because in reality, Jordan has over 70% of the population are Palestinians. So they say, why should we give, this piece of land that was owned, quote, by us for many generations, if they have already a Palestinian state? Nobody challenges the fact that we need peace to survive as a democratic country, because the state of being in constant warfare has a toll on society, both moral toll, both economic toll. So everybody wants peace, but we discuss how to reach that peace. And that's the dilemma we have in Israel, how to reach that. But your very question shows how complicated that is. The fact that Menachem Begin, a guy that was educated to believe in the two sides of the Jordan, which was even more, all the way to Iraq, Jordan included, Iraq included, and he's the guy that signed the peace agreement with Egypt. That within this agreement, the framework was that there would be a solution for the Palestinians within 5 years, which never, came into. So if I must summarize, I think the wish for peace is universal in Israel. This is really, it's even written in our letter of independence, which are our constitution, so to speak. We don't have a constitution still. It says that that's what the state of Israel is built for, to reach out peace, etc., etc. But we're still fighting on how to get that. And I think 70 years is not a very long time, country years, to define exactly where we're going to go. Israel is an experiment still. That's the truth. We have our highest points, we have lowest points, but we're there, we exist. I think that given the chance, any chance for a safe peace, any prime minister from any party would gladly sign. But as I said before, unfortunately, that's not the case. So we're going to have to wait for the Messiah to come, or for a new Palestinian leadership to arise.
Which are the next Arab countries in the list?
Well, obviously, there's bigger countries in the neighborhood that we really would like them to, to open up their borders to us. Some countries have opened their skies to us, by the way. Saudi Arabia allowed all the flights that are going 40 flights a week between Israel and Dubai only. And there's also 20 something to Abu Dhabi. They fly over Saudi Arabian airspace, which is a big step for them. So we hope that, within the near future, next steps will come. It's not easy for them to do that, but I think we are going there, inshallah, as they say.
Could you detail a little bit your mission there in Dubai? So how is your routine like, and what are your goals?
And my goals is obviously to establish the relationship and flourish the relationship between the state of Israel and the Emirates. We divide the Emirates are 7 different Emirates. It's like the states in the US. It's like a federation of different Emirates. So Dubai, which is the richest one, which has most of the oil, it's taken care by the embassy, and I take care of the other 6. So my goals are to establish relationships, network of relationship, establish commercial relationships. Actually, one of my main projects here is to do a triangular relationship. I don't know if you heard, but there's a Quad, it's called. It's a diplomatic, let's say, influence area, which is the United States, Israel, Emirates, and India. India is a very, very close partner of the Emirates. And there's 4 million Indian citizens in the UAE. And many of them very powerful businessmen. If you go into Dubai and you see the Fortune 500 companies, 60% of them, of the CEOs, are Indians. So what we're trying to do is to do projects that include American, Indian, Emirate investment, Israeli technology, to work in India, to work here, to work on the neighborhood. That's one project that I have. So again, it's a very broad mandate. I have to get the Emirate states close to Israel. We haven't started doing people-to-people projects yet because, you know, we're just here a year, and I still don't have a full team. I don't have a full consulate even when temporary, you know, we have a big open space with 12 people sitting together, and we don't have classified communication. It's a very chaotic still, but we're getting there. Don't forget, Michel, that we had 2 years of no government in Israel. So we didn't have a state budget at all. So I couldn't even, you know, it's like I had the bare necessities to rent a house, to rent an office, but I couldn't do a delegation or I couldn't do anything because there was no money. Just imagine that your 2 years, you know, for me it was like 10 months here with no budget at all. So now we had for 4 months this new government. We do have a budget, which also took a long time to establish, and then for the money to actually come down. We have a lot of challenges here. That's the truth. But if you think of it, you know, we had the prime minister already here. The president just left a few hours ago. The Minister of Foreign Affairs came to open the consulate and the embassy. We had, in the past year, 14 ministerial visits from Israeli ministers to Dubai and to the Emirates. So I think we're doing, you know, considering all the elements, we're doing okay. I'm still frustrated. I would love to do much more, but I think, you know, to being pragmatic, I think we're doing okay.
Schwei.
Yeah. One day at a time.
Are the Emirates going to Israel too? What do they do when they arrive there? Is there a tourism going on?
No, the truth is, no, Israel was in lockdown most of this year, as you know. There was a period that even Israeli citizens could not go. You know, I couldn't go. I had actually a demonstration in front of my hotel because the first month I didn't have an apartment. I lived in a hotel. A demonstration of Israelis who got stuck here in Dubai because they were not allowed. And until the Supreme Court said that this is unconstitutional, that you cannot have citizens of a country not being able to return home because of COVID. So people are like, for I think 6-7 weeks, they were stuck all over. And then we opened on the November 1st, you know, and the December 6th was supposed to be the first Emirates flight because Emirates not flying out to Israel. And then COVID started and we closed the borders again. So now we opened the borders 2 weeks ago, but Emirates a little, you know, hesitant to, and also we have a waiver visa program. I mean, Emiratis don't need visas anymore to go to Israel. But we have very few Emiratis going to Israel. We have very few people going to Israel, you know, unfortunately, because of the COVID. COVID in Israel is very high, the number of cases. So there's not many Americans going to Israel either. So,
but there is potential, you think?
Yes, we believe there's a lot of potential, and you know, the Ministry of Tourism is. Twice we started to do a campaign, you know, putting billboards and signs in the, you know, the main road of Dubai, but we put it down after, you know, 5-6 days because there's no point in doing campaigns and then people cannot fly into Israel. So, but we see that there will be a lot of because it's 3 hours flight. It's very cheap, and Israel has a lot of offer to Muslims, Christians. So yes, we're expecting a very high number as soon as COVID is a little bit calmed down.
So I feel we are heading to the final moments of this conversation. I'd like to invite those who are with us to ask any final questions. If you'd like to unmute yourselves and ask it out loud, there is no problem. I'm receiving one here. Philip Yach, how much anti-Semitism and anti-Israel among the people in the Emirates?
Again, I didn't hear that. The line was...
Anti-Semitism or anti-Israel demonstrations among the people in the Emirates. Have you ever seen anything?
No, no. The truth is, you know, this place is a very peculiar form of government. I mean, once the decision is taken, as you know, one of the sheikhs told me once, I'm very democratic when we're discussing, but once I took the decision, that's it, you know. So once the government decided that Israel is a partner and they're going to be, we're going to make peace, people just, you know, went and followed. In the social media, you see sometimes a little bit of criticism, mostly by, not by Emirates, mostly by people who are, you know, other nationalities here. Emirates are very, you know, we had no conflict with the Emirates. You know, it's in their best interest. We had a Jewish community here for the past 10 years. I mean, there's a community here of 400 Jews. We have now 2 rabbis who, of course, are fighting each other, and another community that doesn't have a rabbi because they don't want to have a rabbi. So, and the Jews here, you know, the Chabad rabbi, you know, Levi Duchman, walks around dressed like a Chabad dresses. Absolutely nothing. And it's also a very safe place. You know, the crime rate here is close to 0. You know, I walk around with 2 phones. I have an Israeli phone, I have the Emirate phone. So I always get messed up and I forget phones in the coffee shop and a restaurant. And I've done that 3 times. You come back 2 hours, 3 hours, a day after, you know, your telephone is there. It works. It works for them. So no, I can't say that there's anti-Semitism. There's lack of understanding what Judaism is. For instance, the fact that we keep discussing each other, you know, they boggle this. They come to me and said, well, what's the difference? The guy is a rabbi and this one is a rabbi. Why don't they agree? And I find sometimes hard to explain to them that, oh, that's the way we are. I mean, we like to discuss. That's why we're so creative, innovative. We just keep discussing all the time. But anti-Semitism, not at all, actually. Really, really, I would say completely free. And it's very rewarding for me because, you know, I told you, Michel, before when, you know, Seder Pesach this year, I did with a couple of Israelis, you know, friends, and a family of Muslim, you know, people who were really sincerely interested. They said, what is this? I mean, we heard that you know, use blood to do the matzah, or whatever, because, you know, that's what they heard when they were kids. So can we come and see? And I said, of course you can come. So we spent Pesach, you know, teaching going out of Egypt to a Muslim family, and not only to the kids, and was really, I said that evening was the highlight of my year here for me as an Israeli, doing Seder Pesach with the Emirates. So no anti-Semitism at all. If you feel any threats in the States, you can come to Dubai. I think you're going to feel much safer than you are feeling right now, actually.
There is an additional question from Stephen. Do other Arab countries use the Emirate as a go-between for their business dealings with Israel?
Definitely. Stephen, you got the point. That's why we spent the last 20 years, you know, setting up shop here. I mean, the Israeli government. Dubai is a hub. You know, Dubai is a very small emirate, very small population. But what they do have is that they have a hub. They have a port. They have many ports, but one of the main ports, Jebel Ali, is extremely, extremely effective. It's run by a company that owns over 100 ports all over the world. I mean, the port of London, for instance, is an Emirati-owned port, and they're very, very efficient. So, and they also base their economic model on what they call free zones. They have, like, the city is spread into free zones that this zone is completely independent, has its own legislation. You don't pay taxes. By the way, there's no income tax here to anybody, just VAT of 5%. That's the only tax you pay. But still you have customs tax. So once you have this, your company and your merchandise in these free zones, you don't pay anything. So many people who want to do business in India or in China use Dubai as their hub. So yes, many Israeli companies bring their products to Dubai, to one of the free zones. You take the label of made in Israel, so to speak. It's more complex than that, but that's basically it. And you just repack it and sell it to all over the Middle East. I can tell you that, irrigation equipment, drip irrigation, that it's an Israeli invention, and, Netafim and Magal, which is two biggest companies, they doing many, many, many hundreds of millions of dollars in the region. And the guy who runs the area is a friend of mine. He has a Portuguese passport, even though he doesn't speak a word of Portuguese. Portugal gives passports to people who can prove you have Sephardic roots. So he goes around, countries that you wouldn't. And I said, aren't you afraid of going to these places and selling? They know he's Israeli. They know he's Jewish. No problem. The guy has been doing this for years, and he works. So if you want, that's one of the reasons that they made one of the reasons, not the main reason, but one of the reasons they made the peace with Israel is because we have many, defects, but we have one quality. We're very innovative. And you go into Israel, you find new technologies that are really, breakthrough in every sense, science fiction in every field. And they know that we have that, and they want to have that too. So most of this peace agreement and what's happening now, it's using Israeli technology to do all sort of projects here and in the region as well. And it's working. It's working really hard. Now it's better because we don't need to hide that. But in the neighboring countries, we still have to do that. We have to take off the Made in Israel label. And but yes, there's, you wouldn't believe how much yogurt, dairy foods, vegetables are being sold in all the region, and it makes us very happy. That's the truth.
So I would like once again to invite you for a final one or two questions. If you wish to unmute yourselves and say the question, there is no problem. Before I thank Ilan for this incredible conversation. So any question? Feel free to ask.
People are hungry, I think, right? It's right lunchtime.
I see Anita. Anita, can you unmute yourself?
I don't really have a question. I just want to say that I am so appreciative. I've learned so much, and I just want to thank you, Rabbi, and for your having such an esteemed friend. And I think, I'm sure I can't speak for everybody here, but certainly for myself and my husband, I think this is one of the best and informative interviews I've ever heard. So I want to thank you, and of course I want to thank him.
Very nice.
Thank you, Anita.
Thank you so much, Anita.
For pity, my wife is not in the room. She should have listened to this. She always tells me, don't lecture me, and then you're boring. So, thank you, Anita.
We're not boring. Absolutely not.
We are recording, Ilan. I can send it to Jackie too.
Okay. I'm kidding, of course.
Anyone else would like to add a question or a message? We are about to finish. So I would like to conclude with one of the sources that I've read in the beginning. It's the Sanhedrin one. So which is the judgment that has peace within it? You must say this is mediation. Mediation, as both sides are satisfied with the result. So Ilan, thank you so much for your time, for being so kind with me and with this congregation. And may we repeat this conversation many times in the future. Thank you.
And soon in Dubai, when you're coming.
Great. We will. Looking forward.
Okay. So good night. For us, it's like 10 o'clock at night. So see you in Dubai.
Laila Tov, Toda
Thank you so
Rabba,
much. Thank you so much.
and Shukran. Toda, bye.